So I felt like talking about James Gunn's Superman. I saw this movie on opening weekend. I think it was the Sunday. I took some time to kind of assimilate my thoughts about it, and I had kind of come to a conclusion about it a couple of days after I saw it. But there were a few things that stopped me from making this video. First of all, I didn't really find the time to sit down and record, but also I really wanted to know why people love this movie so much because for context, I am not a massive Superman fan. I'm not a massive comic book fan either. Most of my knowledge of these superheroes comes from the cinematic or theatrical movies. I have seen some of the animated movies, and in the past few days, I've started watching a few of the DC animated movies because I kind of want to know more about these characters, know more about the storylines from the comic books. Because ever since I've seen Superman, I've seen a lot of kind of YouTube shorts and stuff pop up with a lot of these alternative storylines from the comics, and I was really intrigued by some of them, so I wanted to see those movies as well. But yeah, coming back to Superman, yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with the character in the past. I have seen the first Christopher Reeve movie and the fourth one, I believe, and I have seen Man of Steel, obviously, um, and all the Snyder films. I have seen Superman Returns in parts, but not all of it as a whole. So that's where I kind of stood with this Superman film. I was pretty excited for it because it seemed like a lot of people were excited for it, and the proposition of having this comic book accurate Superman and the relaunching of the DCU into the new James Gunn universe, it had a lot riding on it. And after having seen the movie, I thought it was okay. Like, I thought it was just fine. I didn't think it was anything special. I didn't think it really revolutionized the comic book movie scene in any way, for me at least. And maybe this is controversial, but I think I prefer Man of Steel as a film over the James Gunn Superman movie. I'm gonna dive into a little bit about why I think like I believe some of these things, and why that Man of Steel or some other movies may appeal to me more than the Superman 2025 movie, and also why I understand people loving this iteration of Superman so much and why I respect that. So I'll go into it a little bit. I feel like most of kind of the conversation around why people love this Superman movie is that it is extremely uh, accurate, and it is extremely loyal to the comics and the source material, and it does a really good job in adapting all of those things. So first of all, I'll talk about some things that I think were really really good about this movie, and I really appreciate it. I think David Cornsweet is amazing as Superman. I thought his casting was pretty much perfect. He looks like someone I would believe to be this symbol of hope, perfect kind of Superman persona. I thought the suit pretty amazing. Love the colors, love the tone of the film, in the sense that it does definitely feel more like that, again, light-hearted symbol of hope Superman kind of story. And I think all of those things are probably the best part about it. I think Lex is fantastic. I think Nicholas Hoult does an exceptional job of playing this kind of tech whiz, rich, super smart, intelligent antagonist for a Superman film. I think a lot of those things really worked for me. I think most of the characters by themselves in isolation work for me as well. I think Guy Gardner is really good. I think Hawkgirl is really good. Mr. Terrific, Lois, and Jimmy Olsen. I think all of these characters by themselves work. I just think this film bites off way more than it can chew and way more than it can present to me in a cohesive way that makes me actually care for these characters. And I think this was one of the problems that did occur in many of the Zack Snyder films post Man of Steel as well, where there's just so much happening that I'm not really able to care about most of it. And there are too many things put or stuffed into the same thing. Now, I understand that we have seen the origins of these characters so many times. Like, we know how Superman has come to Earth. We know the tragic story behind like Batman's parents. I understand that we don't need to be covering that ground again, but I still feel like taking a movie to re-establish this new interpretation for these characters and kind of having them exist in this world where, sure, there's a lot of other things happening. There is a universe established out there. I think there is still some scope, some amount of requirement to let these characters breathe, give them the time to develop as those characters in this universe. And I think this movie was definitely missing some of that, where it put too much stuff in the same movie in trying to show that this exists inside a larger universe that really detracts from the possibility and potential of these characters. Another problem I have with the film is that Superman really gets beat up way too much in this film. Like, I can definitely appreciate including factors that make Superman a relatable character, because I can understand how it would be difficult to grapple with this character who is this otherworldly force and kind of unbeatable persona. So how do you make the audience care about him? I completely understand all of those things, but I feel like at the same time there needs to be some amount of representation of what Superman is as that powerful unstoppable force, and I feel like this movie takes it too far in the opposite direction in trying to get the audience to connect with Superman, where he barely feels like Superman at that point. To me, at least, being someone who doesn't have all that knowledge from the comics, doesn't, like, I have seen Superman beat up people, but I would rather see it again than him just constantly getting shit on in this entire movie and kind of needing either Crypto or someone else to come in and save him a little bit and push him towards being able to come out of a certain situation. So I definitely think this movie was lacking in cool Superman moments, and I it also hurts more because the ones that are there are really really good. Like the scene on the bridge where he finally comes back from the Kent family home and he saves that one woman in the car and he's rising out of the dust. I feel like that is possibly one of the best Superman moments ever captured on film. And yeah, like I needed more of those things. And like I said, while I understand the idea and the concept of Superman being beat down, of him having to come up against all this adversity, I feel like it goes too far in the other direction, where whenever he is even coming out of that adversity, there's always some external catalyst which is not his own power, his own sheer will driving him through it, and it's someone like Crypto coming up, or Mr. Terrific's kind of little drone showing up and having to drag him out of that situation. And I feel like there could have been more moments of Superman's own kind of sheer willpower of breaking through and coming out victorious at the end. I could have used more of those moments. Um, a few more gripes that I have is that this is an extremely James Gunn feeling movie, and that's not a bad thing per se. I think the things he does well, he's able to do extremely well. But one moment that does stick out is like when Superman is trapped in that pocket dimension and then he's trying to come out of there, and then he gets stuck in this like Lego movie looking, I don't know what it was, that river that was being sucked into the black hole. All of that just looked super artificial to me. It looked super Minecrafty or super Lego movie like, as I said before. And those things just didn't sit quite well with me, where the movie felt way too childish. And again, I understand everyone who says that it's a comic book movie, what else do you expect? But I feel like there's a balance that has been struck in the past where, definitely not by the Snyder films, they went too far in one direction. And like I said before, tonally and all the things that represent Superman are done extremely well and probably much better in this than in Man of Steel. But just that sense of scale and that sense of like having this superhero in a comic book world, but also like walking that line between it being realistic while also being a comic book movie, I feel like wasn't done to the best possible way in this film. And like I pointed out, certain moments feel too much like this movie was made only for children, and there are not many things that I can derive from it that go beyond the surface level. And I think when the trailer for this movie came out with the interview between Superman and Lois, and how they're talking about him going into another nation and stopping this war from breaking out, and what are the implications of that in terms of legal regulation and international relations and all of those things. I feel like those things end up being very surface level by the end of it, where they're not explored fully in the complexities in which they could have been explored in, of having this Man of Steel in the real world and how that would kind of implicate these different regulations and laws and how people perceive him. I feel like that would have made for such an interesting premise that isn't really cracked to its full potential in this movie, which ends up being diverted by these childish subplots for the sake of adding that action and adding that weird James Gunn quirkiness in this film. And I think some of those things just don't work for me, where I'm sitting in the hall and just kind of giggling at how Crypto ends up being the one saving the day every time, rather than and it being that Superman film, that kind of representation of him as that beacon of hope. So I definitely have a more than a few gripes with this film, but I think overall it was a pretty entertaining film. I'm happy for every Superman fan out there who really enjoys this and thinks that this is their Superman and thinks this is like the most accurate representation of the source material on screen, on the big screen. But to me, while I can appreciate those things being true as a film, because I approach this more as a film enjoyer than I do as an enjoyer of this character, I feel like it just doesn't work at many points, and it ends up being a very shallow, surface level kind of exploration of these themes and characters that have the potential of being interesting and definitely keep me intrigued about the future of the DCU and where it's going to go, but also apprehensive in terms of, will any of these movies really be good to the level where they move me or they make me think about them, or have these new ideas that are able to balance that comic bookiness and the accurate representation of these characters with more thought provoking kind of points and more entertaining things on screen that are more than just a few feel good moments. So I'm definitely intrigued to see where this goes in the future, but going back to the Man of Steel comparison a little bit, while a lot of the scenes from Man of Steel and Zack Snyder films have been criticized for compromising the morals of these characters in favor of moments that are just aura farming or just to look good on screen, I feel like I could have used some of those in this to get me back and to think that, yeah, I'm watching a Superman movie, I'm finally visiting this character again, where it makes me think Superman is cool while also abiding by those principles and morals that he stands for. Like, for instance, I would have really loved to see a scene, and I thought it was going to happen when Superman was kind of fighting the microbiotic lady that works for Lex, and he takes her up into the sky, and I was hoping that it would go to, like, he would go up and through the atmosphere, all of those microbes or whatever would burn off, and then we would see that shot of Superman with the sun getting charged up, and then he would fly back down. And cool things like that. But I feel like that opportunity is missed a lot of the times, where it could have been, those cool moments could have been added without kind of detracting from what the movie is trying to do. I think Lex, in fact, gets a lot more cool moments, and that makes me really like him as a character as well. Where there's this sheer sense of envy that comes to him for Superman, and the way he tries to beat Superman, like full on real Steel style, controlling the Superman clone to kind of fight him. I think all of those things are extremely interesting. And a few things I've also heard is that this is kind of the first time that Superman is beaten at the start of the movie, where he lands in uh, Antarctica, close to his like, I forget what it's called, his safe home or whatever. Yeah, so it's kind of alluded to in a lot of interviews that have been done that this is kind of the first time that Superman has been beaten, and before this he has had a lot of victories and he has become this symbol of hope and this symbol of power already. I could have used with seeing those things more, seeing him really beat people or aliens up rather than him needing that crypto catalyst, like I've said before, to drive those things forward. So, yeah, those are my main thoughts about Superman. I thought it was a decent film still. For me, it was probably close to a 7 out of 10 type film rather than being that 9.5 out of 10 that people have been calling it to be. But I thought it was entertaining nonetheless, and it still keeps me intrigued about the future of the DCU and where these characters go. But yeah, that's all for now. Peace.